In a previous tutorial, when we added a spatial CSV of free meal locations during COVID, we created something that looked like this. We added a shapefile of New York City borough boundaries in order to place our points on top of it and be able to show where in New York City those free meal locations were distributed. So what we get here is kind of a shape of New York City floating in space, which can be great in its simplicity and can work well in certain situations. But let's say you want a little bit more context for viewers, which could be for a variety of reasons. It could be that your audience isn't very familiar with New York City, and so doesn't have a lot of points of reference, just looking at the shape of it. Or it could be, for example, that you want to show more of a neighborhood scale, in which case I'll show you. If I am to click the zoom in tool and then draw a rectangle to zoom into an area, this looks like absolutely nothing. And so you're going to need a different approach, for example, to show streets and street names. So I'm going to zoom back out using a really easy method where I just right click on my layer of points and click zoom to layers, and it's going to take me back to a map extent of the free meal location data. So instead of using borough boundaries as the base map or the underlying map for my data, I'm going to add in a base map from a web server. To do that, I'm going to go here to the plugins menu, manage and install plugins. And then I'm going to go to all plugins and search for one called Quick Map Services. And these plugins offer a variety of additional tools in QGIS to expand its functionality. Quick Map Services is a great one for adding base maps. So I will click here for install plugin and close it out. And then up here, I have a menu called Web, where I can look at Quick Map Services. I can open it up, and I'm going to have a variety of different options. If you don't see this many options from the beginning, you can go here to Settings, and then More Services, and click on Get Contributed Pack. If I click it, it's going to tell me that I already have that pack downloaded. So here's what happens when I add a base map. I'm going to start off with Google Hybrid. Now I have a satellite image that also includes labels and designations for roads and highways, which looks the same as if I turned on satellite view in Google Maps. It appears underneath all of my layers as another type of layer with this little checker pattern. And I can treat it like other layers. I can check it to turn it off and on. And I could also turn off my borough boundaries here because it definitely looks odd to me to have the borough boundary shapes on top of the base map. And now my points are actually still on there, but they have gotten much harder to see. So one thing I can do is change their symbology. I can double click here and then make sure I'm in the symbology menu. I can click on simple marker. I'll have a lot of customization options. So I can click here for fill color and then make this more of, let's say, a yellow. I'll increase the size a little bit too, and then I'll apply that. And so that's more visible. Personally, I don't like this style very much at all. I think it's much too busy. It's hard to tell what I'm actually trying to get across here. Let's see what it looks like at a neighborhood scale if I click my zoom icon and then zoom into Bushwick and Brooklyn. There's a couple points here, still very hard to see. I could adjust them again. This time I'll try red and make it much bigger because we're now at a much smaller scale. And I can see my points now. So this could theoretically work in order to show locations, but let's try a couple other base map options. So I'm going to just delete this base map and I will add in something called positron instead. Positron is a pretty neutral kind of map, and you'll see just major street names labeled here. So you're going to have to decide for yourself if that is sufficient for what you're trying to convey. These big red points may or may not be what I want. If I zoom out a little bit more, I would say these are probably too big. So I'm going to double click again and change this size to 5 and apply it. That might be a little bit more like what I want to show. If I zoom out to the full extent of New York City, now these points are a little too big and overlapping. I can't really distinguish them from each other at all. For example, it's really hard to tell how many are over here in the Harlem area. So I'm going to adjust that symbology again. I'll make this 3. Going to make these a darker gray color, and I'm actually going to decrease the opacity so that I'll be able to see them overlapping each other. So now these are size 3, kind of a medium dark gray, and I can see that in points the circles are overlapping. So sometimes people create heat maps when they're at this scale and trying to show the concentration of points. I personally like using this opacity method to show the concentration because I feel like you get more visual detail from it at a large scale still. So this is something to play around with your base maps, with using something like borough boundaries for the shapes. And of course, another benefit of using a base map is that you get the surrounding area as opposed to having the geography for which you have the shapefile out there floating in space. So that is how you add a base map from an external web service to your map in QGIS.